Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. This is Victor again with my Ioniq 5. Today's video we're going to answer the question, does going slower really get better range and efficiency on the highway? Specifically going around 60 miles per hour. So there's three things that I want to hit in this video. Number one, you can get excellent range and excellent efficiency driving on the highway. Number two, driving just a few miles per hour slower makes a huge difference with range and efficiency. Number three, don't forget about the wind and the elevation changes. So first off, huge shout out to PCs&EVs, to Thomas and his channel for doing range tests that I found very helpful. Clearly Thomas had to spend a lot of time driving in loops, so props for taking the time out to do that. Here's a collection of his range test results and mine. Definitely check out his videos though for more info on his range tests. So his first test was a 75 miles per hour test, averaging 2.7 miles per kilowatt, which turns into a 209 mile range. My own 65 miles per hour range test resulted in 3.6 miles per kilowatt and 279 miles of range. Then there's his 55 miles per hour range test with a 4.2 miles per kilowatt average, 325 miles of range. And then there's my 57 miles per hour range test, 4.25 miles per kilowatt average, 329 miles of range. And these are really important numbers because you can reference them when you need to know how far you can go depending on how fast you're going to be driving. So let's get to the test parameters for my range test. About once a week I play basketball with a bunch of other dads at a YMCA in the suburbs about 30 minutes outside of Philadelphia. We play at 7 a.m. because the gym is empty, and that gives us just the rest of the day with the family. So that means I'm on the road by 6:30 a.m. and there's absolutely no traffic, just smooth sailing on the highway, which is perfect conditions for HDA2's adaptive smart cruise control, and also perfect conditions to drive near the speed limit without any issues. So my range test is essentially a round trip, first to the gym and then back home, going just over the speed limit at around 57 miles per hour. Now on to the data. My trip to the gym was 20.8 miles in 22 minutes at about 57 miles per hour, 70 degrees Fahrenheit outside. On the way back was about 20 miles, 21 minutes, again 57 miles per hour roughly at 75 degrees Fahrenheit. Now not exactly the same in terms of mileage because I manually reset the trip gauge after I got on the highway, and then I took that reading manually while I'm getting off the highway. So just averaging those two trips together nets me a 4.25 miles per kilowatt efficiency rating, which if we assume 77.4 kilowatt hours as the usable battery size, results in about 328 miles of range on the highway. And that's crazy. Everyone typically associates higher speed driving with low efficiency and poor range figures, which is true, but if you drive near the speed limit, you can shatter the EPA estimates. The other crazy thing here is the difference between driving 60 and 65 miles per hour. Like I mentioned, I've done this quite a few times, once a week or once every other week, and in the beginning I was driving at a steady 65 miles per hour, and I was getting at best 3.6, maybe 3.7 miles per kilowatt hour. And at that speed, I'm also having to switch lanes frequently because I'm too fast for the slow lane, but too slow for the fast lane. But in my head, it felt like a reasonable number. Well, then I watched PC&EV's range test, and again, I'll link those in the description below. And I thought, wow, he's only going a few miles per hour slower than I am, and getting amazing efficiency on the highway. Maybe I'll try going a little bit slower, and, well, the results speak for themselves. You can get excellent range and excellent efficiency driving on the highway if you drive close to the speed limit, more specifically under 60 miles per hour. Again, it may depend on speed limits near where you are. In some states or some areas, the speed limit is 65 or even 70 miles per hour, and it's just not safe to be going under the speed limit, so you won't have any other choice. But if you have highways with 50 to 55 miles per hour speed limits, you have the potential to get amazing efficiency if you're going the speed limit. The second point was that driving a few miles per hour slower makes a huge difference with range and efficiency. Well, obviously 60 versus 65 miles per hour was a change in about 42 miles in range for me, driving that same round trip on Saturdays in the same weather conditions. So that's significant. And lastly, the third point, don't forget about the wind and the elevation changes. So I was getting different numbers from home to the gym versus gym to back home, and that shows the elevation change effects. I'm clearly doing more uphill driving on the way there and more downhill driving on the way back, and I can confirm that indeed that was the case. Now there's also different numbers on different weeks, but the same average efficiency, and that shows how wind can play a role. Stronger wind on one week will exaggerate the numbers on both legs of the trip, or no wind means relatively similar numbers on both legs of the trip. In ideal conditions, there is the same traffic every time I drive, and on this road I'd say they've been relatively the same. Also, weather conditions have been relatively the same, so the only variable left is wind factor. And even though it hasn't felt significantly different, I don't really remember any windy mornings, but I guess even a slight breeze can make quite a difference. Facing a headwind versus having a tailwind pushing you in the back just makes a huge difference, but unfortunately that's kind of out of your control. So real world application, what does it all mean? Well, if you need to go a certain amount of miles without stopping for a charge, here's a chart to reference how fast you should drive. For some people, they would rather drive fast and make a pit stop to charge the car, as our Ioniq 5s, EV6s, and GV60s all charge very quickly. But let's say you need to go about 300 miles, and you'll have access to a charger at your destination. Well, all of a sudden, you have two options. Number one, you can drive fast and make that pit stop to charge the car, or you can drive slow and skip the charging stop altogether. Now, personally, if I'm unfamiliar with that station that I'll have to charge at, then I would just plan to skip that charging stop altogether. Number one, there's no guarantee the chargers are working properly. Number two, there's no guarantee that you won't have to wait if it's a crowded station. So personally, I would drive slower if those were my two options. Now, another scenario is, let's say something happened and you misjudged your range, or maybe weather conditions threw a curveball at you. Well, now you're cutting it really close, or your projected range says you're not going to make it to the charging station or your destination. Well, there is a way to immediately increase your range, and that's to slow down. That means you start driving the speed limit, and all of a sudden you could see a 10 to even 30% increase in range depending on how fast you were previously going. Now, worst case scenario, you're driving on the highway and your battery's at 0%. Well, you could theoretically turn on your hazard lights and drive below the speed limit. Obviously that's not recommended, but if the roads are clear, you do what you have to do to make sure you make it there. So again, I'll throw this chart up so you guys can see the numbers. It's just a crazy difference between 55 miles per hour and 75 miles per hour. So it's up to you to figure out, wherever you might be traveling to, is it worth it to drive slower and skip a charge session? If your trip is more than 300 miles, then you'll probably want to make sure you're staying in the car's optimal charging curve, so that means only charging to 80% anyways. But if you're able to charge to 100% before leaving home, and your destination is about 300 miles away, where you'll have access to charging upon arrival, just know that you have both options available. You can make it there without having to stop to charge, or you could drive fast and make that charge stop along the way. But it's good to know that our cars can do both, depending on the speed of travel. Hope that was helpful for you guys. Again, shout out to Thomas on PCs&EVs channel for doing his range tests. Mine were just condensed range tests, whereas his were full-on, full battery range tests, which take hours and hours. So definitely check out his videos. Now, for those of you who travel long distances regularly, do you guys drive 55 miles per hour, 65 miles per hour, even 75 miles per hour? I'm curious to know what you guys are doing out there. Anyways, thanks for watching. See you guys in the next one.